Hello there. Now, have you been quite a thinking girl or boy? I bet you have. Tonight's bedtime story is called Little Miss Curious. It is written by Roger Hargreaves with pictures by Adam Hargreaves. Little Miss Curious is a very curious sort of person. Just look at her house. It's a very curious shape, isn't it? Now look at her garden. That's curious too, isn't it? Now look at Little Miss Curious. She's rather curious looking too. And she also has a very curious nature. She wants to know the how, why, and what of everything. One day, Little Miss Curious set off for town. Why do doors squeak, but are not small and furry, with pink ears and long tails? She asked her door as she went out. Understandably, the door didn't answer. Why do flowers live in beds but never sleep? She asked the flowers in her garden. They just smiled knowingly. Then she saw a worm. Why do worms in Nonsense Land wear bow ties? She asked. That's for me to know and you to find out about, said the worm, laughing. Later on the way to town, Little Miss Curious met Mr. Nonsense. Are you curious to find out what she asked him? Well, go on then. Turn over. I'm curious, began Little Miss Curious, to know why is that sandwiches are called sandwiches, but if I don't have any sand in them? It just so happens, said Mr. Nonsense, that this is a sand sandwich. I'm rather partial to sand. Happy Christmas, she said. Then Mr. Nonsense ran away, holding his sandwich carefully so that the sand didn't fall out. Little Miss Curious eventually arrived in town. Did I hear you ask why? Well, you are curious, aren't you? But are you as curious as Little Miss Curious? Little Miss Curious had gone to town to visit the library. I wonder, would you be able to help me? She asked. Of course, said Mrs. Page, the librarian. What are you looking for? I'm looking for a book, began Little Miss Curious. A book that will tell me why the sky is blue, and why combs have teeth but can't bite, and why chairs have legs but can't play football, and why, and she went on and on and on until there was a very long queue behind her that was growing longer by the minute. That's enough, cried little Mrs. Page. Next, please. But why? Little Miss Curious started to ask. But without quite knowing how or why, she suddenly found herself in the street. How curious, Little Miss Curious thought to herself. As she walked along, Little Miss Curious asked herself, why is everybody giving me such curious looks? And why is Little Miss Careful waving her umbrella at me? Is it because it's going to rain? We don't think so, do we? Little Miss Curious ran off. Are you going to ask why? Are you becoming as curious as Little Miss Curious? Now then, can you guess where she ran off to? Neither can I. Come back, Little Miss Curious, and tell us where you're going. You see, we're all ever so curious. Yes, really we are. That story was called Little Miss Curious. It's time for you to go to bed. And I'll see you soon for another bedtime story. Good night.